Good evening and welcome to Play or Not to Play, That is the Question, brought to you by the Hemophilia Federation of America's Families Program. I'm Carrie Koenig, Families Program Manager at HFA. Also on the line, we have a wonderful panel of experts who will be sharing their experiences with us. We also have our moderator, Christy Van Horn, a public health consultant with HFA. Just a few helpful hints before we get started. We have allotted approximately 1 hour for tonight's webinar. We certainly welcome and request audience participation and engagement. However, your audio will be muted for the duration of our webinar presentation by our system, as it helps eliminate background noise. We look forward to your participation, and if you would like to ask a question, please utilize the chat tool on the bottom right of your control panel. We will then pass your questions on to our moderator. We will be answering all questions at the end of our presentation. We would like to take a moment to thank Genentech, Novo Nordisk, Bayer, Accredo, CVS Specialty, and the CDC collaborative partners for funding our Families Program. Without their generous donations, this webinar would not be possible. And just as a reminder for everyone as well, that this webinar is for educational purposes only and is not intended to be construed as medical advice or the official opinion position of HFA, its staff, or its board of directors. Attendees are strongly encouraged to discuss their own medical treatment with their healthcare providers. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Christy to introduce our panelists and to get the discussion started.
Hi, good evening, everyone. As Carrie mentioned, our topic for tonight is to play or not to play. That is the question. There is so much conflicting information about whether a child with a bleeding disorder should play sports. We're going to hear from our experts, those with bleeding disorders, and parents who made the choice to allow their children to participate in sports. The panelists will share their experiences and provide useful insight on preparing for sports. As Carrie mentioned, we want to thank our sponsors for this webinar. And just again to send the message that this is for educational purposes only and not to be construed as medical advice or the official opinion of HFA, its staff, or board of directors. So what we're going to start with, actually, before we introduce Dawn, is a few polling questions. We want to get a feel for who's on the call tonight and just see who we're talking to. So Carrie, do you want to launch the first question? Perfect. So the first question is, does your child participate in sports? And then you can select yes or no. We'll wait a couple seconds. Oh. Did I lose it? No, there we go. So 100% said no. Okay, good to know. And then we have a follow-up question. Do you discuss your or your child's bleeding disorder with their coaches or teammates? So 50-50. Some people do, some people don't. And then I think we have another question. Do you collaborate with your provider to plan for sports participation? And this would probably go for gym class as well. $100%, great. That's a great number. And I think there may be one more.
Oh, that's it, Christy. You can keep going.
That's it? Okay. So 3 questions. So up next, we are going to introduce Dawn. So Dawn, if you want to just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you live, your connection to the bleeding disorders community, and then also, you know, what sports has your children or child participated in, and how you made that decision to allow them to do that.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dawn Evans, and I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And my connection to the bleeding disorders community is I have a 24, almost 25-year-old son. He is severe, factor 8. I'm a symptomatic carrier, and my dad also had severe hemophilia with complications. He had Hep C as well. And he passed away about 10 years ago from those complications. So I've lived with it my entire life. And my son Dylan, who now, like I said, is 24, he played softball, t-ball, baseball, basketball. He started when he was younger all the way up through high school. He played varsity sports. He is a college graduate. He didn't play too many sports in college, but he was still very, very active. And we decided to allow him to participate in sports because honestly, he loves sports. He's a little boy and he wanted to play. And so we decided when he was younger to make sure he was going to be safe, but just to allow him to play. And it took him all the way through high school. And we were really smart about it. We worked with our treatment center, but we let him, as he got older, make the decision on what he wanted to do or didn't want to do. So that's me.
Thank you, Dawn. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Up next, we have Stewart. So Stewart, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from and your connection to the bleeding disorder? And we can see you doing some sports here in this if you want to tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Stewart Worthington. Excuse me. I live in Portland, Oregon. I started, my connection to the bleeding disorder community started when I went to camp for the first time, probably around 5 or 6 years old. Went through, participated in camp for the next 10 or 12 years, became a counselor. Still do that to this day. I've chaperoned the teen program here in Oregon and also have been on the HFA board for a number of years. And also participated in Blood Brothers here and there. And my family, I have an older sister, so I was a gymnast growing up, and my sister was the first one to participate in gymnastics, and I think, she influenced and inspired me to try it. So that was my main sport, and I just have a active family in general with, cyclists, and my mom is probably the major health nut of the group with yoga and sports classes and, things like that. That photo that you can see is my last year as a competitive gymnast. My senior year.
Awesome. Thank you. I just noticed the huge box of donuts in that photo.
Yeah, well,
it looks very good.
That is one of the benefits of participating in sports. It's but we'll go into that later. So
that's great. Thank you, Stewart. We appreciate it. And last but not least, our third panelist is Todd. Todd, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, and your connection to the bleeding disorders community, and then, of course, your child's experience with sports?
Sure, will do. My name is Todd. I'm from Akron, Ohio, and I have 3 boys. Christopher, my middle son, is how I'm connected to the hemophilia community. He has severe factor 8. Let's see, I've been on the Northern Ohio Untitled Chapter board for almost 4 years now, and been a speaker for Dads in Action for almost 3. Christopher is very active in sports. He's 20 years old, and he is currently at Akron University. He's played many sports, baseball, soccer, basketball, golf. He even swam. Currently now at Akron U, he decided not to play college sports, and he is just playing league. I'm very active. We come from a very sports-minded family. All my boys play sports, and I'm still active like coach and umpire and referee. And I think more than half of my time is spent at either a gym or a field.
That's awesome. Thank you, Todd. So we're going to jump into some questions now. I'm going to ask the panelists to answer a few more specific questions about participating in sports. And we're going to start with Stewart. So Stewart, can you tell us what were the benefits of participating in sports? And maybe share a personal experience and how it affected you in a positive way.
Okay. Well, I'm a severe hemophilia A person, and so first and foremost, being a severe hemophiliac, I have to infuse regularly, and my schedule is every other day. And sports gave me a reason and a routine to keep my factor levels up and stay healthy. Beyond that, participating kept my conditioning and strength and flexibility good, and also taught me technique to avoid injury. It taught me to take care of myself outside of the gym, in regards to injuries, and eating healthy to maintain a healthy weight and be the best athlete I can be. All these things, benefited me while I was during my gymnastics career, but also afterwards when I went to college and started playing basketball and weightlifting a lot more, and of course, just horsing around on the weekends. And about experience, so that's probably the physical aspect of what benefited me by participating, but there's also a social experience, and being a part of a team, it gave me a place where I felt I belonged, and I was around my teammates a lot, and we went through a lot together, and we became just really good friends to this day. So those sum up probably my key benefits.
Great, thank you. Up next, we're going to ask Dawn how she made the decision to allow her child to participate. And were there steps that you took to make this decision? What things did you take into consideration, Dawn?
Well, when Dylan was little, he really wanted to play baseball. So he started off with t-ball like most little boys. And we really, I knew that there could possibly be issues with him having a bleeding disorder and playing a sport, but him being on a team sport, being with friends, just kind of like what Stewart said, just that outweighed kind of like the hesitation. We talked it over with our HTC, and we just kind of came up with a plan, and he just never looked back. We decided that him being able to play and be on teams like that just really outweighed any kind of our hesitation to not let him.
Thank you for sharing. Todd, our question for you is why or how did you also make the decision to allow your child? Every parent is different, so the steps that you take or the things that you consider might be different for you. Can you provide some tips for other parents or talk to us about your experience?
Sure. Much like Don, Christopher was very active, and his friends were very active as well. And rather than put limits on him, we kind of encouraged him to pursue and to be active. Chris at an early age, I think the first thing he played was maybe basketball, and then he got into t-ball and soccer. But as far as the decision-making process, it was pretty much not allowing him to limit himself, or as parents not to put limits on him. Like I said, we pretty much encouraged him to do anything and try new sports. As Don said as well, we also talked to the HTC, got their opinion, and then the best thing to do was to sit down as parents and talk amongst each other, and we made a collective decision to allow him to go ahead and play sports. And from there, he blossomed and took it on and played all the way through high school.
Great. Yeah. So sitting down and having those conversations, you both mentioned talking to your HTCs. It's really great advice and tips. Stewart, I want to go back to you for just a second and ask you, for your opinion, as somebody who grew up playing sports, what advice, now that you're older, would you give parents? Kind of looking at it from a different perspective. What advice might your parents give? What advice would you give to parents as somebody who grew up with a bleeding disorder?
I would tell them that if I'm speaking to the parent, it's to let their kids try. That's how I first started doing gymnastics. I just tried it. They let me try it. It was at a low level. So, and, there's not much risk, when you start young and at a low level. And then, after you try it, then becomes the passion, and then, all the benefits I previously mentioned. So, I think that's all you can do is really try and learn from your mistakes, and adjust things the way you need to, and it'll pay out in the long run, I feel.
Great. So you've all mentioned preparation. So let's talk a little bit more about that. And Stewart, I'm going to go back to you. How can you how did you best prepare your body to participate in sports? And what tips do you have for parents?
I would say consistency was key, and just being consistent with my training and consistent with my medical needs, and building a foundation of conditioning to stay healthy and be able to participate. You can't just jump in and start doing an activity at a high level. You need to work your way up to it, make sure your body is prepared to perform in that way, and to reduce your risk for injury and other things. So I would say consistency and all those different aspects.
Great, thank you. Todd, what did you share with coaches, and how did you communicate issues with the coaches?
Much like sending your child to school for the first day, or a new school or a new environment, the same way I approached the coaches. I let them know what Chris' diagnosis was. I had explained to them in detail what it consisted of. And then it's just basically educating them or being an advocate for your child at that point in time. Most coaches, and me as a coach as well, you like to know that information ahead of time so you know what you're getting into. And all the coaches that he's had in his life have been very, very receptive of it. Haven't had any trouble. Just like I said earlier, there's no difference in going to speak to your teachers or anything to that nature. You always want to approach the coaches in the same manner and just talk to them.
Great. Can I ask you and Stewart? Stewart, jump in if you have any additional thoughts. But I would love to hear specifically what types of things that you talk to the coaches about. Could you give us an example of a few of the things that you mentioned in those meetings, a few of the things that you make sure to discuss with them?
You want to Stewart? Okay. Well, my situation was a little unique in that I had the same coach from when I was 8 years old, first starting on the team, to when I was 18. So really that initial, speaking to the coaches, I was too young to, be a part of that. But they definitely did, mention that I had hemophilia and, these are the risks and what to look for. And I don't know how my coach perceived it or, how much he understood, but he still gave me a shot. And, there's a lot of trust that needs to happen between the coach and the athlete. And I guess I didn't appreciate enough at the time that it's important for the coach to listen to you and to know when to, to let things rest, and then also when to, push you a little more. So trust is an important factor.
Great. Todd?
Oh, I agree with Stewart. One of the things I guess was an advantage to us is that I coached Christopher until he got into, I'd say about junior high. So I was his coach, and obviously I knew his condition. But from there, like as far as specific things that I talked to with the coaches, like I said earlier, it was letting them know his condition, what it consisted of, treatment options. One of the main things that we had to talk to the coaches about was not limiting Chris, just being able to treat him like a regular athlete or player. The other thing was, of course, his bag, carrying along, packing his medicine and anything else just in case there may be an injury or anything to that nature. So anytime there was a trainer, say for instance on his high school team, we made her aware of, this is a bag, this is medication. At that point in time, Chris was already able to self-infuse, so it made things a lot easier, especially when they were going road trips or anything of that nature, and his mother and I weren't able to get to the game. Being able to speak to the coach specifically or the training staff and letting them know, like, this is medication, what needs to be done, things of that nature was very beneficial in his athletic career through high school.
That's great. That's really great advice. Thank you. Having the bag and talking to the coaches and trainers about that's helpful. And last but not least, Dawn, we want to ask you about if you have any experience with your child having injuries, and how did you handle that?
Yeah, Dylan's had, a few injuries here and there, but I do remember one time when he was playing, it was his freshman year of high school, and he was playing baseball, and he took a line drive right to the face, right in the mouth, and we were watching him, and like all the parents turned around and they were looking at me, and I just calmly got up and walked over to the dugout and asked the coach, is he okay? And he's like, he put some gauze back in his mouth and went right back out there. So he went out. I walked back to the stand, sat down until the end of the game. He just sat there with that gauze in his mouth and finished. We got home and infused, and he looked at me and he just said, "Thank you for not freaking out." And I know that, the kids do pick up on that. And if they look at their parents and see their parents freaking out and causing a big ruckus, they panic. And so I've learned over the years to kind of just stay calm and treat and make sure, everybody's okay and he's all right, but just try not to panic. And he was able, as he got older, when he played basketball in high school, he would get ankle bleeds, and that was a target joint for him. And he decided that was too much for him, but he made the decision that baseball was okay, but basketball, he was going to kind of give up. And so he just didn't play basketball because it was a little too rough on his ankles, but we let him make that decision too.
Great. Is that a conversation that you would, that he came to you about, or you just had an open dialogue about that?
No, he did come to us, and he just said that, after the games, even when he was treating, he was still, that was his target joint, and it just got to be a little too much for him, and he just made the decision that one wasn't worth it for him. So it was nice that he felt a little bit in control of a situation that maybe he didn't have a whole lot of control over, getting bleeds and stuff. So that just made him feel better.
That's great. Great. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's an important message to share. I do want to ask, because I feel like it might be a question that many people have, and maybe you haven't actually had this experience, the three of you, but what advice would you give in this situation? And my question is, have you ever had a problem with a coach or a gym teacher? I know Todd said, and Stewart also, mentioned that, just letting them play, letting them be a part of the team. Have you ever had a problem with a coach or even a gym teacher letting them just be themselves and play and be a part of the team?
This is Stewart, and I personally never, having the same coach, we went through, 10 years together, and I don't remember ever having a problem with him or any other coach that I had. They're all very receptive.
Stewart, can I ask you?
Yeah,
go ahead, Dawn.
No, sorry. We never had any problems either.
That's really great. So can I ask, though, if you did, what are some, if you had a problem, what steps would you have taken to talk to them, or what would you have said?
Well, I can answer that one. The only problem that I've ever had would be when Christopher's gym teacher, I believe it was in like 5th grade, when we came to a new school, and the gym teacher wasn't aware of his condition. When she found out, she kind of freaked out and wouldn't let Christopher participate in gym class. It's really on the other side of coaching, because with the coaches I've dealt with them directly, but same scenario in the sense where we went in, had to speak directly with the gym teacher, educate him, as well as some of the other teachers in the school. And then from there on, Christopher was okay to participate. But it was just the idea, or the fact that they didn't have the knowledge of what hemophilia was or what they were capable of doing. But after speaking with him, going over and educating him, everything came out fine.
Great. So yeah, sometimes the power of a conversation, right? And just saying, you know,
Right.
This is what it is, and yeah, that's great. Perfect. It's really great advice. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open it up to our audience for questions. So I will look over here in the questions box. Actually, Carrie, do you mind if people want to put questions in? Carrie can read them for us.
Sure. I actually already got a few that have come in. I'm kind of keeping an eye on it. Yes. So for Stewart, although you said your family is active in sport, surely your parents were probably a little hesitant for you to participate. What advice would you give to parents who really worry about their child or children engaging in sports and even high intensity sports? What advice would you give to them?
Gosh, that's really hard, because I haven't been put in that situation. But I think, my parents probably had, they probably discussed it a long time and put a lot of thought to it and missed some sleep at night, but they were able to look beyond those fears and see the benefits of it and let me at least try it for a little bit.
That's great. That's awesome. There is another question that came in. And this is for the whole panel, and Stewart, have your kids have your kids ever worn a medical ID? And if so, did you ever have any issues with a ref or coach or someone asking you to take it off?
Good question.
Ooh. Dylan always wears a medical ID, and no coach has ever asked him to take it off, ever.
Did you have any issues with refs questioning it or umpires?
No, never.
Great.
Todd, you're a ref.
Yeah, the children are allowed to wear the medical bands. Chris wore one too. The only thing I've ever seen, and the only thing I've ever asked somebody to do is with a necklace to tuck it in, or even to tape it to their chest so it doesn't bang around or somebody can't grab it. The other thing too, if it's on the wrist, if it's a metal bracelet, maybe putting a wristband over top of it so that it stays in place and you're not scratching anybody. But you are allowed to wear them as a player. And I've never had a problem with anybody asking him to remove it or anything to that nature.
That's great. And those are great tips to remember to tape it down or to put a band over it. For Todd and Dawn, what advice do you have for new parents on starting sports? Should the parents start light and move into higher intensity ones, or should they just kind of allow their kids to pick and choose and learn their own limits?
In my personal opinion, you have to let a kid be a kid. Granted, there are limitations. You don't want your kid being a starting linebacker or something of that nature, playing some full contact sport with a bleeding disorder. But you have to leave it up to the child. And most of the children will decide they'll either lean towards the sports or lean away from it. You never want to force a child to do something they don't want to do. As a coach, I see that all the time, where parents are dropping their kids off and forcing them to play sports that they have no business or have no desire to play. And you don't want to do that with any child, whether you've got a hemophilia or bleeding condition or anything else. So I've always let Chris pick and choose. He played multiple sports when he was younger. When he got to high school, he decided all he wanted to do was concentrate on soccer. And it was his decision. Same as when he got to college, he had offers to play, and he decided that at that age he just didn't want to play a college sport. He decided he'd run and play rec with his friends, and I was okay with that.
Yeah, I completely agree with Todd. And I think Stewart said it best when he first started off too. It's a team sport. You make friends. You're part of a group. I mean, there's just so many benefits to letting your child be a part of a team and just trying it.
Yeah, totally. I could see that, and this is kind of like a follow-up question. Having those experiences, have you noticed that it had an influence on building your child's confidence growing up?
I can say yes. When Chris started playing soccer, we live in Ohio, Akron, Canton area, where football is big. And of course, Hall of Fame's 10, 15 minutes away from our home. So football is a big sport here in the state of Ohio. And all his buddies were playing football, and he had a desire to play football. But as far as the confidence, when he excelled on the soccer field and started getting the cheers, make the paper and everything like that, his confidence went to a whole new level. He met all kind of friends, traveling, playing in different leagues and everything to that nature. He's still friends with those kids today.
That's great. They build those relationships young. Yeah, Stewart, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to find success and, on the field, but it's also going to teach you to get past failures. In gymnastics, you fail 100 times before you make that skill. So it teaches you progression and consistency and being persistent. And then that success, feels that much better.
More rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That perseverance, building that perseverance. And one last question that came in. When did your kids, and Stewart, when did you disclose your bleeding disorder to their teammates? When did they kind of feel comfortable enough to do that?
Dylan he's always been upfront with his friends about having a bleeding disorder. Honestly, nobody really cares. They're just like, yeah, okay, Dylan has to get a shot every couple days or whatever. Nobody's ever had an issue with it or has said, ooh, get away from me or anything like that. So his friends were always really cool about it.
That's great. Todd,
Yeah,
Stewart, did you guys have a similar experience?
Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, the guys that I started young with, they knew about it for a long time, but as I get older and there were other people joining the team, I needed to break the news somehow. But yeah, they were always receptive, and it really they didn't see a difference between somebody with hemophilia and somebody without it. They just the athlete. So I think that would help a lot.
Yeah, it wasn't like they put a label on you, which is great.
Right.
Yeah, with Chris, I think it was the same way as well. I mean, all his buddies, his close friends knew, and his teammates knew. As far as him, when did he tell them or anything to that nature, it started when he was young. The guys that he grew up with and are still friends today, they all knew. And then, of course, when he got to high school, he explained the situation to some of his teammates and things of that nature, and it's progressed from there.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. And thank you to our panelists and to our moderator for this very insightful discussion. I also want to thank the audience for your many questions that have come through this evening. But before we sign off, we do have some poll questions for you to answer. So I'm going to launch those last couple poll questions, and when they pop up on your screen, feel free to click how you best answer it. So after the webinar, do you feel more prepared to discuss yours or your child's bleeding disorder with their coaches or teammates? And it does show that, yes, 100% of our attendees find that after this, they feel more confident and prepared to discuss their child's or their own bleeding disorder with their coaches and teammates. And after participating in this webinar, do you feel more prepared to plan for sports with your or your child's providers? And yes, the attendees definitely, and the audience definitely does feel as though that they're more prepared to plan for sports with their child's providers. So just one last thank you to our panelists. I really appreciate your discussion today, and to Christy. Just as a reminder, we have recorded this webinar and it will be available on HFA's social media and website within the next few days. So please check back with us, and thanks again. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.